So today I'm going to be giving an overview of the SR&ED program. It's often called SR&ED, stands for the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program. So this program, it's a Canadian program administered by the federal government of Canada as well as several provinces within Canada. And the purpose of this program is to incentivize research and development work among Canadian companies. So particularly smaller companies can take sort of the most advantage out of this program. So there's a few things to know that people are often curious about when it comes to the SR&ED program. The first one is, what is it, which we briefly already touched on. Who is eligible? Some work that is qualifying work under the program. Just how much this program can benefit businesses. And sort of tying it all together. So as I mentioned, the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program, it basically provides compensation to businesses in order to offset expenses that occurred while they were doing work that qualifies for the program. So we'll get into what work qualifies shortly, but essentially this program is not giving you grants in order to go out and do work. It's all done in arrears. So once you actually complete the research and development work, you get to look back on that, see which expenses you incurred, and you get to essentially get some of that money back from the Canadian federal and provincial government. So the program is extremely large. It's administered by the CRA. And it is valued at $3 billion. It's distributed to about 20,000 Canadian companies annually. So this is a program that's very wide in scope, and it's very accessible to many businesses. And this sort of contrasts to some other programs that are labeled, tax credit programs and incentive programs for businesses, where the amount of money that actually goes out and the difficulty to get into that is rather excessive. So who is eligible for the SR&ED program? Okay, so there's some criteria that needs to be satisfied when you're looking at whether or not your business might be eligible. The first criteria, there's got to be expenses related to the work being claimed. Now this can be expenses as it relates to, you've got salaried employees that were involved in a project that's eligible. You have subcontractor costs or materials, prototypes, scrap materials that were involved in the eligible project. Furthermore, the work being claimed, sort of as I mentioned, it has to qualify for the SR&ED program. We will get into what work qualifies and what the requirements are, but obviously the project that you're claiming, it has to be an eligible project. And then there's some more minor details just relating to making sure the work was done in Canada. 90% is the number there. You got to make sure that the expenses being claimed, they were paid to a Canadian entity. So if this is a salaried employee, they've got to have a social insurance number. If it's a subcontractor, they've got to have a business number in Canada. And sort of another detail that's very important is the expenses must have incurred within the previous 18 months from the fiscal year end that you're filing for. So you can go quite far back in time with this program. So often you get companies that they've done this work, but it's a while out. They've already filed their T2 for the year end in which the work was done. And they think, hey, there's no way to go back, get these credits, but often it is possible to go back and do the adjustment. So getting into a bit of specifics. So what work can you look at within your company to see, hey, does this qualify for the program? And then start looking at those expenses and putting together a claim. So there's sort of a lot of different ways you can look at how work might qualify for the program. And if you go on the Canada Revenue Agency website, you're going to see a ton of different takes on what qualifying work is. You're going to see a 20-page document essentially outlining qualifying work, but essentially it all boils down to the same core principle, right? And that is, it's very important. You just have to have performed experimentation, prototyping, and possibly trial and error in attempt to resolve a technological uncertainty. So, first of all, there's got to be a technological uncertainty you're trying to solve. You've got to go through that process of trying to solve the uncertainty, and then you have to have learned something in the end, which obviously, if you go through the process, you will. It doesn't matter whether the project is successful or not successful. As a matter of fact, failed projects are often the easiest to claim because it proves that the work was not routine, right? So if work's not routine, it's often experimental. So again, in other words, the project, if you face risk that you might not have completed it satisfactorily, due to technological challenges, that's often SR&ED qualifying work. So anything that falls outside of normal business practices, routine stuff, is something you should be looking at to see whether or not it's SR&ED qualifying work. The definition of this does get fairly difficult for some people who don't do this every day. So it's often advised to look for a consultant who does this for many companies, who works with companies with this program. And oftentimes you can have a free discovery call, talk over some of the work with an expert, and sort of get an answer to which projects that your company did that might be eligible for SR&ED and which projects your company did that might not be eligible. And it's an extremely lucrative program. So as I mentioned off the top, the SR&ED program is worth $3 billion annually. And it's reimbursed as a percentage of the expenses that were incurred. And these percentages are actually very high. So if you've got a full-time employee in a CCPC in Ontario, for example, oftentimes you're getting 66% of that full-time employee's salary back in the form of SR&ED credits. So, if you hire an engineer at your company, for example, who's making $100,000 a year, and let's say in this example, for 100% of his time, he is doing SR&ED work. He's working on projects that are eligible for the program for the entire year. In that case, you would be receiving $66,000 back for this employee under the program, which is extremely significant. This can change the way that you think about structuring your organization. Another important thing to note, that these credits are highest for CCPC companies, for smaller companies in Canada. For larger public companies, the credits do go down somewhat for them. And another thing is, for CCPCs, these credits are, for the most part, refundable, which means that when you file for these credits at the end of the year, you're getting them in the form of a check or a direct deposit from the government. This is not just a sort of a tax benefit that you only get when you're making an income and you get to use this to reduce your taxes. These are refundable credits. You can spend them any way you please. So as I said, this is done in arrears. So you're getting these credits back for work that you already did. So this money comes in, it's completely unconditional. You can take it out of the business if you'd like. There's no requirements on anything like that. So this video was just to sort of touch on the SR&ED program. It is quite in depth, and there's a lot to know, especially if you're putting in your first claim for your business. It's often advised to work with experts. So G6 Consulting, we are a company that's been doing this for 12 years. We work with hundreds of companies on their SR&ED claims, and we sort of guide them from start to finish. Oftentimes with consultants, our service is not done on a flat fee. It's done on a contingency basis. So what ends up happening for you, the business that's looking into this, you only pay a percentage of the credits that you receive. So if you work with a consultant and you're unable to get your SR&ED credits, it ends up being no cost to you other than sort of the small amount of time that you spent with your consultant going over the work, because consultants in this space bill for a percentage of the credits, not hard time. So it's certainly often worth it to work with an expert to maximize your claim. And this is something that you really don't want to be looking at as sort of a quick buck. As a business, this is something that you can do year over year, and it gets easier as you get into the program. Your claim each year gets easier because you're in the program. It becomes a regular part of your business process. It becomes something that you can rely on as a budget item that, hey, we're doing this work, but we know we're getting X amount back in terms of credits. And that often changes the way that, as I said, you think about doing business. So to learn more about this, I recommend visiting g6consulting.ca. You can give me a call, 905-483-6459. Or there's another great expert who, again, has been doing this for 12 years, Greg Hills, at 416-704-3879. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully you learned a little bit about SR&ED that you might not have known before. Thank you.